In this video we are repairing an oil leak on a C9 engine, and to do that we have to remove the HEUI pump. It's a good movie to watch in case you want to see how to remove and reinstall a HEUI pump. The leak is coming out of the plug at the end of the cylinder head like this. We're not working on this engine is brand new. I just used it because it's good footage. This is the engine we are working on. It's in a crusher and it's painted blue, not cat yellow. It's been all cleaned down. There's not much. This is an 08 model. There's no changes really made as far as pulling the pump off that you need to worry about. So off comes the intake pipe. Then we take the breather out. So fuel goes from the tank through the ECM. This is on the suction side. Goes up to the transfer pump at the back of the HEUI pump, and then that gets pumped from there up into the filter housing. It's at about 70 psi now, and then goes through the filter housing and then into the cylinder head and through the fuel rail. There is a pressure relief valve on the other side of the cylinder head, and that's what holds the pressure in the cylinder head. There it is there. And then this is oil from the engine, low pressure oil from the engine, goes up into the feed into the HEUI pump, and then through this high pressure rail into the cylinder head. So there's 4 hoses we need to take off and 2 bolts. So I've cracked a nut on the hose. I'll take the hose off. This is the oil feed line. They're JIC fittings. It's important when you put the steel lines back on that they're clean and you haven't got any dirt in there, because nothing's filtering it after that. And this is the high pressure oil line to the cylinder head. Take that off. It's an O-ring face style. Take the fuel lines off, fuel in and fuel out. There's 2 bolts at the front of the engine you need to take off. They go through the front housing and hold the pump onto the engine. There's a Deutz plug there, 2-pin Deutz plug. Take that out and it's ready to come out. You just undo your bolts at the front. You don't need to have the engine timed or anything like that. The pump itself is quite light. You can lift it out fairly easy. This one is a lot easier to work on, this C9, because it doesn't have a compressor in the way or anything, and then the pump just comes straight out like that. There's nothing that changed in these pumps, so if you had a new one, there was something wrong with this one, you could just stick a new pump straight back on and away you go. You don't need CAD ET or anything to program a new pump. So this is where my oil leak was coming from. It got all gurneyed down before we pull it apart, but we're pretty sure it's leaking out of this plug. Now these plugs are on real tight. It takes an inch spanner, and I put another spanner on there and I still couldn't crack it, so we're going to put a bit of heat in with a blowtorch, try and heat the fitting up and loosen it a bit for us. So I put 2 spanners back to back because you can't get a socket in there with a ratchet or a breaker bar, and it cracked eventually. This is the oil rail that the injectors run off. That's what this plug holds the oil into. So if you're cleaning out your oil rail because you had steel in the injectors, you'd be taking these plugs out to flush the whole system out. That's what this plug's for. We're pretty sure it's just a flat O-ring. The O-ring's just hard and brittle. We had to break that off. And that's pretty much it for fixing this oil leak. New O-ring. Lube it up with heaps of engine oil. Put it back in, and can't get a crow's foot in there. The torque's pretty high on there, so I just put my foot on that. This is on the pump. New O-ring on the pump. Lube that up with engine oil. You don't have to worry about the gear or orientation, it can go on anyway. You just slide the pump in and you'll feel the gears when they align with the idler gear it runs off. Once it goes in there, you can just push it forward and put your 2 bolts in at the front and do them up with a spanner, because I can't get anything else in there. Put the plug back on. These torque up to 55 Newton meters. I can only torque one. The other one that had the plate in there, couldn't get a socket on there, so I just tensioned that up with a spanner to what I thought was about 55 Newton meters. And then all your fuel lines can go back on. I put new O-rings on the O-ring face high pressure steel line. Definitely worth putting engine oil on the pipe nut just to help it go on. It needs a little bit of lubrication. Make sure your steel lines are clean before you put them back on. I put brake cleaner through mine just to make sure they're clean. Any contaminants that gets in there when you pull them off and you put them back on, it's going straight to the cylinder head. There's no filter after the pump. It's all just straight feed. This is the oil feed line to the pump. I had to loosen that fitting so I could move it out to accept this steel line again, and then push it back into place. Make sure you put it on the right way. See, I had it on the wrong way there. And then a bit of engine oil on those nuts as well, just to help lubricate them. Depending on what engine your C9 is in, you can have all different types of fittings. These steel lines, they're the go, they're pretty easy to pull off. I know on trucks and that, they get weird push and pull on type fittings. They're made out of plastic and they're just a right pain in the ass. These ones are the go. I don't know if you can change them out to these ones, but they would be the better option. We need to run the engine without firing to build up oil pressure back in the cylinder head that we dropped out when we removed that plug. So an easy way to do that, or a Brumby way to do that, is just to take the ECM plug out that goes to the injectors and all the engine sensors. She won't fire now, and then we'll go down and run it for 15 seconds and just build up engine oil pressure. Don't look at your engine oil pressure gauge because they'll always be reading right. It's the HEUI rail pressure that we need to build up, and you probably won't see that on any instruments you've got in your cab or on your machine, but that's alright. As long as we run it for 15 seconds, it should have enough engine oil in there. When you do this, you might get an indicator light flash an active code. You don't need to clear it with ET, it'll go away once we plug the ECM back in. Fire the engine up and run it at an idle for a few minutes. And that's running as sweet as your Nana's kisses. If you like this video, click and subscribe. Check the playlist out, there's other videos like this in there.